So you've reviewed a lot of budget guitars over the year, a lot. So is there anything that like jumps out at you? Any particular models or which ones that jump out as like favorites or better than some of the others?
Well, it's not so much that there's particular guitars, although there have been particular ones I was really impressed with. But the biggest thing with me, with the budget guitars, is the pressure that they have put on other more established companies. You take a company like Epiphone, or something like that, that's been known as like a more affordable, alternative to Gibson or something like that. I think the Epiphone guitars have gotten a lot better in the past 5 years because of all the competition from other companies that are making affordable guitars.
Right.
So that's been a huge thing. I think kind of the same thing with like some of the Jackson stuff. I love Jackson guitars, but their budget guitars in particular, like the JS series or like the X series, those guitars are so much better than they used to be like 10 years ago. And again, I think it's, if it had just been up to them, I don't think they would have improved that much. But
Right.
because there was so much competition, like other companies making really good, $300 guitars, right? That they had to step things up, and I love that. One thing in particular is these rounded ball-in frets, right? That we have now. I really like those.
Yeah.
And
That's a fairly new thing. Like
It
a few
is.
years ago, you just didn't see that.
yeah, totally. And if you did, it was on like a plect, guitar. It was something
Yeah.
really high end,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So seeing that stuff now, and it's having that same effect where it's like other companies are like, oh, maybe we should consider doing this. So
Yeah.
that's been really cool. So like, yeah, I guess like the Eert stuff and Latitude, which I forget what the connection is there, but I think it was like some people that split
the
up
guy
or
that
something.
started Latitude used to work for
Right.
Bert, and then he kind of branched off on his own
Yeah,
and
yeah.
started his own company.
Yeah. So like I think it's like the Eert, like, what is it, a TT380 or something like that. It's like a telly with the rounded ball and frets, humbuckers, and a coil split switch, and that thing shreds, man. There's particular brands, and obviously I've checked out a ton of the Firefly stuff, and I have my signature guitar with Harley Benton, right, which we'll check out later. I may or may not have brought with me, and so yeah, there's so many cool budget guitars to choose from, but I think my favorite thing is how they've kind of made the established companies kind of sweat a little bit and
Yeah.
reevaluate what they're doing.
So what brand, big or small, over the years do you feel has consistently made the best shred guitars?
Okay, so consistently, I think I would have to go with Jackson, and maybe second would be Ibanez. And there's a lot of other companies that make great shred guitars today,
Yeah.
but either they're older companies that had some rough patches that they went through, like BC Rich or something. I think even Charvel, you can kind of, Charvel today is awesome, but there were some rough times with Charvel, like in the early 2000s. Yeah, I think I would have to go with Jackson, because you can get a 90s Jackson that just rocks, I don't know how many people have like seen the video over on my channel where I played like, it's like the third prototype Jackson. It's the third Jackson ever made. The Randy Rhoads.
Yes, I remember
guitar.
that one. Yeah.
Third Jackson ever made. That thing rocked. It was great. Heavy, but a great shred guitar for sure.
The first guitar that I ever bought with my own money, I think I was probably 17 years old, and I'd saved up money working my summer jobs, probably like 2 or 3 years in a row, and I drove to San Francisco with my best friend, and I had like $2,000 cash in my pocket, and went to Guitar Center in San Francisco, and I bought a USA Jackson yellow and black crackle.
Oh,
and it
nice.
was just, it was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I played it so much, I literally wore the frets like almost all the way down, and I had to get it refretted at some point. Okay, so here you are with your signature Guitar Max Harley Benton guitar.
Yeah.
Looks awesome. So kind of tell us like how that came about and the process and what went on with that. Oh, I get to hold it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the Harley Benton Guitar Max Fusion Signature. And it was in the works for a very long time. I went to the Harley Benton or the Tomon Gearhead University event, which was back in 2019. At that point, you know, I had already been talking about Harley Benton stuff for a while, and I talked to the guys there, and I was like, hey, what do you think about doing a Guitar Max kind of like signature or a special edition guitar?
So it was your idea.
It was my idea, but I went to them and I said, what do you think about this? And they were like, yeah, nah, I don't think so. They were
Really?
Yeah. They were like, well, maybe later. You know, they weren't that interested. And then about a year went by, and so this was going into like 2020, and then they came back to me, and at that point I'd kind of forgotten about it. You know, because it's like they didn't seem interested, and so I'm like, okay, I'll move on to other things.
Yeah.
But I think during that time, my channel had grown, and I had continued to talk about the Harley Benton guitars. So yeah, they came back to me and said, hey, do you still want to do that guitar? And I'm like, yeah, of course.
Oh, you were like, well, I don't know now, guys, you know.
Yeah, so at that point we're like, okay, you know, I've got some ideas, and like it didn't take me long. Like, you know, it was something I was back beforehand I was thinking about anyway, so I pretty much already had the design in mind.
Well, I think a lot of guys have their ideal specs of like
Yeah.
what's, and I don't know if everybody out there does this, but even when I was like a teenager and you dream about having your own signature guitar and like,
Yeah.
what would my own signature guitar look like and what would all the features be and everything. I think a lot of guys probably daydream about that maybe.
Yeah, and you like draw it on the back of your homework. Or
Yeah, I did. I totally.
Yeah. So yeah, it didn't, you know, the specs were ready to go, like off the top of my head. And so I started working with the guys, and the only issue was that when we were developing it, this was right in the middle of COVID and all the lockdown stuff.
Right.
And like the first prototype, like the neck was made in one factory and the body was made in a different factory, and they were in different countries. And then Harley Benton would get the prototype and they would kind of critique it. Then they would send it to me and I would critique it. And then we would compare notes and like make the changes, and then it would be like another 6 months after that to make those, to implement the changes.
How many prototypes did you go through?
There were, I think, 4 different prototypes. And I've got one that is scalloped. And it was something that like we were gonna do it if it could be affordable. And it was not affordable.
Oh.
Yeah, so the Tesla pickups, not endorsed by Elon Musk.
Yeah.
But yeah, that turned out, that was their idea actually. Like I had originally talked about just the Roswell pickups, which are their standard Harley Benton pickups. They're like, oh, you know, there's this new Tesla brand we're working on, and we think it's going to work great, and you know, we'll send you, you know, the prototype with these pickups, and you can tell us what you think of them. And I love them. And yeah, the dual rail in the neck, no middle pickup.
So would you say at this point, after this is the final prototype, did they nail everything? For you, is this like the perfect guitar now?
Yeah. I mean, they completely nailed it. I would say, I think the green could be a little brighter, maybe something like that. You know, we like the 80s flashy stuff.
Yeah.
You know, you've got this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So I like some pizzazz, you could say, right? You know, the guitar that you can see from the back of the stadium, right? So yeah, I think maybe we could make the green a little bit brighter. There are some people in the comments section that don't like that it doesn't have inlays.
Oh.
It has the dots,
The side dots, yeah.
which, I mean, you don't look at your guitar, you know what I mean? Like, you don't look at the front of the fretboard, you look down on it, and you've got the dots for that. So I think for the only way I can see the no inlays being an issue is if you're using it for teaching, and someone's looking at the fretboard and trying to like figure out what number it is. But I think for the person who's actually playing the guitar, the side dots work great. And I just like the look of no inlays.
I have to say, I'm in support of the audience. I prefer to have the dots on there.
On there, okay. Well, no, that's fine. And maybe we'll do it. Maybe not.
I mean, it looks
Yeah.
great as is because the color of the fretboard. I mean,
Right.
it looks awesome for sure.
Yeah, and the combination of colors, it's very like you would find this in the forest somewhere, lots of greens and browns.
I actually
and
like
kind
that
of
green.
stuff.
I know you said it's like kind of dark and maybe a
Right.
little brighter, but actually green is my favorite color.
Right.
And the dark forest green. So I actually really like the color on that one.
Okay, well, there we go.
Only thing I would change, guys, is I would get rid of this awful Floyd Rose and
Oh,
put a
yeah.
hardtail bridge
Yeah, yeah.
on there. Come on, hardtail.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens because I would love to do kind of like what Steve Vai has done with the Gem, where there's a bunch of different versions, different colors and things like that. I would like to do the same thing with this guitar. So keep the basic, keep the neck and the body the same, but do different colors, and then like maybe a hip shot bridge or something like that. I would totally do that. So it'll just depend on what the audience wants, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. So did they? I have to talk about the fret size because that's always like for me when I'm checking out these like budget guitars from overseas. A lot of times they just don't have the very big frets, and
Right.
sometimes they have really small frets.
Yes. Yeah.
So did they get the right fret size that you wanted from the first prototype, or was that something you had to tell them like, no, the frets aren't big enough?
No, the fret size they got right away.
Okay.
But that was something I was really like. That was one of the top priorities.
Yeah.
Yeah, the neck and the frets was like it's got to be serious.
Okay.
Yeah, it can't be. They can't be these little short frets, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the satin finish on the neck, that kind of stuff. Yeah, that was all really important. But that was like some of the first things I listed. Like we got to do this and this. Yeah, no, I honestly I can't be more pleased with it.
Okay, so this leads to one of my audience questions.
Yes.
7 Pain 1, he wants to know, are they going to make more of your Harley Benton signature guitars?
Yes, the answer is yes. Yeah, and it's you can go on the Harley Benton, the Tomon website, and they have a rough estimation of when it's going to be back in stock. I was told sort of like end of summer. Like, so August, maybe early September was when they expect to have the second batch of the guitars ready to go. Yeah, and then not to, pat myself on the back too hard, but they sold out so quickly in the first run. I think at this point that it's just going to become like a standard Harley Benton model.
They'll just make it continually.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And that's what I wanted all along, and I think we're gonna end up with that.
So have you ever given any serious thought into launching your own line of Guitar Max budget guitars?
I have given it serious thought, and I kind of took some initial steps in trying to do that, and then decided that it was way too much work. It was like, if that's what I wanted to do, if that was the only thing I wanted to do, I wanted to stop making YouTube videos and all the other stuff, then yeah, I could do that.
Because that would be like a full-time job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd probably have to like hire other people and that kind of stuff. It would be one thing if I was like making guitars at home by myself or something like that. If I was like a luthier and I wanted to make like one-off guitars, that would be one thing. But to have like production guitars, like manufactured at a factory to my specs and QC and all that stuff, it's a massive, massive undertaking to do that. And I think it's just a lot more difficult than people realize. And I've talked closely with, owners of companies, right? Who they run their own guitar company, and just the problems that they have to deal with constantly. It just sounds like such a massive headache, and you'd think like, well, you made a bunch of, the factory made 200 of these guitars, and you sold them, and you call them up and say, okay, make 200 more just like that, and they don't, it's like, oh well, we couldn't get the same pots or something like that, so we substituted this, and then but they're a different, they have a different impedance rating or something, and so now the guitar sounds different, like weird problems like that, where to make the guitar good, affordable, and also like you can get the guitars consistently and have them available to buy. it's such a huge challenge, you know. So I screwed around with it, and I even at home I even have a couple of prototypes that were potentially going to be like my own brand, which, you know, one of them came out pretty cool, but yeah, it was like the consistency in particular was really, really difficult. I don't know, you know, it's not totally out of the question, maybe 20 years down the road or something like that.
You never know.
Yeah, but at this point, you know, when I can go to an established company that already has experience doing that stuff and they've solved a lot of the problems themselves already,
Yeah.
you know, I can be like, hey, let's do a signature guitar, and it's better for everybody, I think, including the customers, right?
Yeah. You review a lot of guitars that are made in China, and you get a fair number of comments on your videos from people saying, I would never buy a guitar from China. I'm not going to support the CCP. Those guitars are made with slave labor. How can you support that? So how do you respond to that kind of thing?
Sure.